All right, so before we dive into the theory, I just wanted to make some general remarks about statistics and using statistics in trading in general, but they are definitely also applicable to our dashboard, which is obviously why I'm discussing them. I think there's a very important nuance to make about reading statistics so that you really understand, have a solid foundation of what you're working with. Now, I call this, there's such a thing as probabilities versus historical occurrences. They are very much related, they are very closely related, but there is a slight difference in there. Now, I'm going to start off with by saying something that you might not expect, and that is that there's actually no such thing as direct probabilities in trading. So you might be wondering to yourself, okay, well, if that's the case, what are we doing here? Well, hang with me. This is not a bad thing, but it's important to understand that there are actually no direct probabilities in trading. Now, first, I want you to understand what are direct probabilities. You can say you have a direct probability or a probability, so to say, or let's say direct probability, if all variables are known. For example, think about a coin flip. You know, a coin has two coins or two sides of the coin. So if you flip it 100 times, you know that the probabilities are 50% that you end up with either side of the coin, more or less, right? Also, for example, think about that you have to open one door out of three. And behind one door is the price. There's three doors, you have to open one. All variables are known. There's three doors, one price, and you have to open one. So you know there's a 33% probability of you choosing the right door. In trading, we will never have all the variables known. That brings me to the next point. We're always dealing with incomplete information. You probably already know as a trader there are thousands of different tools you can use for your TA. You can use fundamental analysis, technical analysis, you can trade the news, you can do all kinds of things. And even if you just would stick with a certain subsector of technical analysis, you still have an enormous amount of ways to deal with this. So you're always dealing with incomplete information, which means there are always unknowns, right? There's always things you do not know, which is not a bad thing because you just have to find a system that knows a couple of things and that works over a long period of time, and it's fine that you don't know. But the thing is, we're always dealing with incomplete information. At least this day, there's no system yet that really can deal with all information that is available, and probably will never be, or never is a big word, but there's one very specific thing of incomplete information, and that is that there are always unknown future variables. So this is the thing. We're extrapolating in this case, right? We're trying to use past historical data with statistics to predict the future price movement, which means you're extrapolating into the future. Now, with extrapolation in general, not just with trading, you always have to account for, or you cannot account for it, but you always have to realize that there is always unknown future variables. So something that might matter today might not happen, that might matter today might not matter tomorrow. Something that is not existing yet might exist in the future. For example, a super smart AI or something that completely changes the whole market. So there are always unknown variables, and this means that if you don't have all the variables, you cannot have direct probabilities. So what we try to do in trading is that we try to find patterns that have occurred in the past and assume they will happen again in the future, right? And this assumption is important. It's not a bad thing, but this assumption is something we must make, right? So we try to find patterns that happened somewhere in the past, or in the recent past at least, and then we'll say, well, since this pattern has been happening, we'll assume that it will happen again. And this assumption is something you have to make because there are simply unknown future variables once we things discussed. This means that we're always dealing with estimated probabilities, right? So when you hear us talking about probabilities, I want you to understand it is estimated probabilities, right? Not direct probabilities. It's simply impossible. But don't worry, we can work with this, right? This is not a problem. If this would be a problem, then there would be no profitable traders in the world. So we can work with this, but I just really want you to understand the nuance here, that it's not direct probabilities, and that is actually, there is no such thing, because we have incomplete information and unknown future variables. So now that we know this, I want to tie it to the dashboard and what you're going to learn. And I want you to know that the dashboard presents historical occurrences, right, of a certain sub-selection of an event happening, right? Again, it cannot cover all the probabilities or all the information there is. There's just certain kind of events we focus on, and that we give historical occurrences for. That means that the dashboard quantifies historical patterns. So again, we are looking for patterns that happened often in the past, and then we'll assume we have to make that assumption, right? But we can create estimated probabilities and say, well, how often did this happen? And then, okay, then I think it will, or we'll assume it will keep happening in the future. So that means that we're trying to find these patterns, and this dashboard quantifies these historical patterns. And what I mean with quantifies, puts a number to it, right? Like it happens 75% of the time, 80% of the time in the past. But it's important that it will tell you how often it happened in the past, right? It's not saying there's an 80% probability it's going to happen. Yes, we can use that data to say, well, there's an 80% estimated probability that it will happen. But I do want you to understand the nuance here. So we use this data to estimate the probability of a certain price movement happening again. Once more, this is completely valid practice, right? I think every profitable trader has some system in place where they work on this kind of data, but I just want you to understand the nature of the probability, that when we're talking about probabilities, you're always talking about estimating the probability. So this also means, has an implication that if you see 0% in a statistics dashboard, that doesn't mean there's a 0% probability. It means there's so say we have a certain price movement and you see 0% in that statistics dashboard. That doesn't mean there's a 0% 0% probability that it will happen. It simply means that in 0% of the cases, did this happen in your selected time range? Like whatever time range you have selected and the settings you have selected simply means that it has never happened before. Does that mean that it is impossible to happen again? No. It does mean that it's very unlikely to happen again because it would be the first time price does such a thing. But it's not impossible, right? So 0% does not mean there's a 0% probability. It means there's a very low probability, very low estimated probability, but it doesn't mean it's impossible that it cannot happen again. Likewise, 100% in the statistics dashboard does not mean there's a 100% probability for something to happen. It simply means that in the selected time range and the filters you have applied, 100% of the time that happens. So it always happened. But, does that mean it has to happen again with 100% certainty? No. Does it mean there's a very high estimated probability of that happening again? Yes, certainly. So this is the difference between probabilities versus historical occurrences. And I want you to understand that the dashboard presents to you historical occurrences. It quantifies historical patterns. And with that, we can estimate the probability of certain things happening. And this is probably the closest you're ever going to get to real probabilities in trading. Because once again, you cannot, there's no such thing as direct probabilities. But using hard data like this is the closest we'll get. Then one more thing out of the way, a disclaimer. This video series is for educational purposes only, aimed at enhancing your understanding of the statistical data within the Minoma Analytics dashboard. It should not be considered financial advice. Trading involves significant risk and may not be suitable for all individuals. Any decisions you make based on the dashboard's information are your responsibility. Past performance does not predict future results. Minoma Analytics is not liable for any losses or damages arising from the use of this information. Always do your own research and consider seeking independent financial advice before trading. So with that out of the way, we can actually move into the theory of things. So for that, I will see you in the next video.